Hello everybody, it's your Peacekeeper. Welcome back to the Gaming Lounge, and it's time to reboot our How to Play series on the Russian cruiser line. This is the Tier 5 Kirov class of cruisers. No, this is not the class of Kirov nuclear-powered battle cruisers, in air quotes, nor is this have anything to do with battle cruiser operational from StarCraft. This is just the, mid-30s to mid-40s Kirov class of light cruisers. The Kirov class was a class of 6 completed cruisers that were built between 1935 and 1944. 4 of the ships saw combat in World War II. The other 2 didn't enter service until after the end of the war. The Kirov class cruisers were the first large ships built by the Soviet Union after the Russian Civil War, and were designed with the help of the Italians, specifically the Italian company Ansaldo, and were derived from an Italian cruiser. The Kirov class would borrow heavily from the Italians, and the machinery was adapted from plans for the machinery for the Duca d'Aosta class. The 6 ships were built in pairs, with the later pairs having improvements made to them learned from the construction of the preceding ones. This included more efficient machinery as well as improved anti-aircraft batteries and armor. The 6 ships of the class are Kirov, Voroshilov, Maxim Gorky, Molotov, Kaganovich, and Kalinin. The first 4 ships, Kirov, Voroshilov, Maxim Gorky, and Molotov, all saw combat in World War II. Their war service began with the German invasion of Russia, and the ships provided naval fire support for Russian troops fighting the Germans along the coastline. Kirov and Maxim Gorky began their service by laying minefields near the Gulf of Riga. Maxim Gorky and the destroyer Gnevny ran into German mines. Gnevny sank, while Maxim Gorky was able to sail for Tallinn for repairs. Both would support the defenders of the siege of Leningrad, and both ships would be damaged by German air attacks during the siege of Leningrad. Voroshilov bombarded Constanta, but returned to Odessa, where she would be damaged by German airplanes. She would shuttle around the Black Sea, harassing German positions until the Soviet Union lost 3 destroyers to German aircraft at the Malaya Zemlya, which forced Stalin to forbid the sorting of large naval assets like Voroshilov. Molotov's air warning radar made her extremely valuable. She was moved from port to port to aid in early warning of air raids. Her first mission involved reinforcing the Sevastopol garrison, and while on that mission she was damaged by German fire. She was able to take on 600 wounded and then left. She would serve mostly as a troop transport for the majority of the remainder of the war, until she was attacked again by torpedo bombers and torpedo boats, which blew her stern off. She'd be laid up for repairs until Stalin ordered that no other large naval assets would sortie out without his express written permission. In terms of their in-game play style, Kirov is, as far as Tier 5 cruisers go, one of the more frustrating cruisers to play. Her strength lay primarily in her armor-piercing rounds and relative speed. She has okay maneuverability, okay anti-aircraft, although I should probably retest that with the recent carrier change, and okay concealment. With the exception of the armor piercing, the guns themselves are actually pretty lackluster. They have a slow reload and poor HE shell damage. Unfortunately, these guns will be seen again on Dmitry Donskoy in different mounts. Gun range, however, for the tier is excellent. Kirov is one of the more fragile Tier 5 cruisers. The Citadel is rather large and poorly protected. Bow and hull plating are typical Tier 5 flavor, and as a result, the ship is fairly fragile. There's no amount of angling that seems to make this ship more durable. Combine this with the lethality of the near-perpetual Tier 7 fights, and Kirov can be a bit of a chore to play. Her best playstyle is going to be the one of a cruiser hunter. Her rate of fire is not high enough to engage destroyers reliably, and her HE is pretty weak. However, the AP works extremely well against broadside battleships and cruisers. As a result, focusing on armor piercing, using and hunting broadside targets should be the primary playstyle. Mid-range play will benefit her the most, where she can leverage her speed and maneuverability, relative maneuverability, to kite away from enemy ships. In terms of stats, well, like I said, the ship is kind of a chore to play, and while normally the stats would be something of interest, the ship is more or less middle of the road. 26,200 hit points, up to 150 millimeters of armor, which... oh boy. Where? I don't even know where you would... oh, right there in the conning tower. Everything else is pretty thin. 50 millimeters of Citadel armor. That's it. This is less than a Pensacola has, to put that into perspective. The main battery consists of 3 triple 180mm guns. They have a 16.3 kilometer range, 13.5 second reload time, and a 20.7 second 180 degree turn time. Maximum shell dispersion is 135 meters, with the maximum HE shell damage being 2,500 damage. Chance of starting a fire, 15%. We actually now have this stat in here. That's an excellent change. 29 millimeters for the HE shell penetration, and that's going to be without IFHE on the captain. The AP shell does 4,100 damage when it citadels, and against the cruisers of this tier range, that's actually surprisingly common if they give you a good broadside profile. In terms of other armament, she does have 6 single 100mm secondary batteries, 3.8 second reload time on those, 4.2 kilometer firing range, 8% fire chance. Really not going to use these a whole lot. She also has some torpedoes for some close range action. 2 triple torpedo mounts. They do 14,400 damage, but they only have a 4 kilometer range, which means outside of ambushing, coming around an island, they're really not all that useful. Basically get ignored. In terms of anti-aircraft defense, 9 single 37mm guns, 6 100mm guns, and you can see there the rest of the AA stats there. Maximum speed, 35.5 knots. 860 meter turning circle radius, which is like battleship levels of turning circle radius, but a relatively quick 7.8 second rudder shift time. Detection range by sea is 13.8 kilometers, which is battleship worthy, and detection range by air of 7.5 kilometers. Personally speaking, this ship is definitely not one that's going to hide. Like I said, mid to long ranges are where this ship is most at home, using armor piercing primarily. In terms of upgrades, the upgrades that I currently run on Kirov is Main Armaments Mod 1, for the 20% reduction in the chance of your main battery being incapacitated, 50% increase in the hit point pool of your main battery, as well as a 20% reduction in the time it takes to repair the main battery. In the second slot, I'm running Propulsion Systems Mod 1 for the 20% reduction in the chance of your engine being incapacitated, as well as a 20% reduction in the time it takes to repair it. Again, as far as other options in this specific slot, the only other one that I'd really consider viable for a cruiser is going to be Steering Gears Mod 1, which is essentially Propulsion Mod 1, but for your steering gears. Of the two, I personally find losing my engine is more likely to get me killed than losing steering. In the last slot, I'm running Aiming Systems Mod 1 for the 7% reduction in the dispersion of the main battery. It does also boost the torpedo tube traverse speed by 20%, as well as the secondary battery firing range by 5%, and decreases the secondary dispersion by 5%. But mostly this is using the minus 7% dispersion of the main battery. That's really the only reason I run it. I would not recommend AA Guns Mod 1 or Secondary Battery Mod 1. You could, I suppose, run Main Battery Mod 2 to get the ship a little bit more agile turrets. However, it's going to come with a cost to main battery reload time, and I think the main battery reload's plenty slow as is. So of these, I think Aiming Systems Mod 1 is probably the best, unless you were to need the anti-aircraft gun defense, which, with the recent carrier rework, who knows, maybe you actually do. Anyway, that's enough of talking about this import. Let's go look at it in a battle video. Alright, so this video is actually going to predate the aircraft carrier change, and so as a result, some things may or may not be a little bit different, but in the grand scheme of things, my opinion on the ship hasn't changed much since this video. But what this video does show is how strong this ship can be against other cruisers, and we do get to see a little bit of the battleship, pestering action, but in general, this is not one of my best Tier 5 cruiser games ever. Kirov it seems to struggle. And I think a large part of it has to do with the rather long reload and the relatively low damage output with that long reload. You'll see a couple times here we'll get, a Citadel and some normal pens, and it'll be about 6,000 damage, which is pretty decent. But you get into some of the HE engagements, and, well, yeah, not so much. You start seeing about 2K. If you're lucky, you'll get a fire. Ship's maneuverability gets demonstrated in this. I don't know. In general, the ship is just really not my play style. I really didn't enjoy it as much. And in fact, this ship is a large part of the reason why I've kind of decided to take a break from World of Warships. Between this, Budyonny, and Dmitry Donskoy, I just can't get my head wrapped around some of these Russian cruisers, and maybe it's just a matter of me just needing to play them more. I don't know. But, that's what it ended up being with the Japanese battleship line, which I really didn't really care for until I finally managed to sit down and actually figure out what was causing my woes with them. So maybe I just need to do that with this line a little bit more in depth. But, I don't know. For me, it's just not my favorite playstyle, and you'll see quite a lot of salt in the chat. And like I said, this thing sees Tier 7 fights nearly continuously. Just not a fan. I just don't know of any other way to word it aside from that. I don't know. You can't use the AP against destroyers effectively. You tend to get overpens, which is to be expected. HE is rather lackluster. It's just not a good combo. It's just not really too many strengths that the ship does have, aside from that armor piercing against broadside cruisers, which, if you end up in one of those Tier 4, Tier 5 fights and you're facing off against a bunch of Kumas and Omahas and Phoenixes and Emeralds, and oh man, this thing is an absolute menace. But you end up in a Tier 7 fight, and you really have to play cautiously. You definitely don't want to be the focus of the enemy team because, ooh boy, it doesn't last long. It dies quickly, and that's part of my frustration with it. Some ships have a little bit of merit to their configuration. U.S. light cruisers are a perfect example of a class of cruisers that, while not the best, at least initially, definitely have some strengths. Anyway, here's a pretty good salvo up against this Omaha. He's angled, and there we get a Citadel on 6,007 damage, and that was actually a pretty good hit for an angled Omaha. I was unaware that we could penetrate the Citadel at that angle, but you can see we can still do a little bit of damage to him when he turns nose on, but not nearly as much. You can also see the dispersion. The ship's not overly accurate, and he's only 9k away. We have 16.3k range, which is impressive, but at 9k away, we don't have the accuracy really to shoot any further out. So anyway, now we can see the Omaha is starting to go broadside, so we're going to send a salvo out, sneak it over the island there, and another 2 Citadels and first blood. So we're up to 17,729 damage already, and now it's just a matter of looking at targets. So in this one, I see that the Nuremberg is pushing kind of hot and heavy, and I guess at this point in time, the song Moscow came onto the playlist. I have no idea what's going on in chat. Don't ask. Anyway, I saw that the Nuremberg was basically going to be broadside to me. And this is, again, probably about the most ideal situation for this ship. In terms of its combat capabilities, that you could not get a more perfect lineup for this than this. Shot out. Again, accuracy is okay. Another Citadel, 5,700 damage. Nuremberg decides to take a bunch of rounds, but it really doesn't change course much. And we end up sneaking in and getting just an overpen to kill him, so that brings us up to 2 kills. We have killed the only 2 people that are dead on their team. Off to a solid start. Whew. Now we're going back to the whole mantra of where are my enemy cruisers to shoot at. Well, we got a Gneisenau now that we can shoot some AP at long range. There's a Pensacola, that'd be nice to get to, except for he's out of range. So we're going to continue focusing on Gneisenau now. Of course, we bounce, 180mm AP, lol, turret tops. Yeah, not making through that. Gonna kind of push ahead here a little bit. This ship is really about, placing yourself on the map as well. Having the right mix of enemy cruisers that are easy to citadel, that helps. But you got to put yourself in a place to actually citadel them. And for a battleship player, that might be a little bit of like second nature. Being in the right place to, citadel enemy ships. Oh, come on, get him. Get him. Ooh, those look good. Oh, a normal pen, and it didn't even do damage to boot. But you really have to put yourself in the right places to actually get those citadels. Ooh, Pensacola gets taken out by the Graf Spee. So we're back again to shooting at Gneisenau here. And again, we're kind of moving ourselves to try and get as many broadside targets to shoot at as possible. So we have Furutaka. Furu has got a pretty good citadel to smack if you can get a broadside one. And here we get robbed completely. Sometimes having really bad dispersion really helps with getting hit. Sometimes it doesn't. Was not expecting the Furutaka to smack into the dead corpse of the Pensacola. Had she not, probably would have gotten some good citadels. Oop, angled. Took out a good solid chunk of our hit points there. And here's another good shot. There's some good. And a double citadel on the Furutaka. 9,800 damage with that salvo. So as you can see, the damage starts to rack up pretty well when you get a lot of broadside cruisers and the right broadside cruisers, because there are cruisers in this battle range that you will encounter that will not be so easy to citadel. But overall, once you start to get these broadside targets, it's just kind of one of those things where you're like, come on, turn broadside, turn broadside, turn broadside. AP in this game is so unreliable for doing damage, and I think that's part of the reason why I got so frustrated with it. Giulio Cesare there, gonna go ahead and say no to that and continue to turn out. Liebrecht Moss. AP against destroyers. Even if I would hit him, Oop, 410 on an overpen. Yeah, we're not breaking damage records with AP overpens on destroyers. At this point, aside from the fact that we're missing all of our destroyers, how do you? Never mind. Aside from the fact that we're missing all of our destroyers, things are going swimmingly. We are ahead in points. We have taken out more of the more valuable ships in terms of points. However, not more valuable ships in terms of their actual combat capabilities and their influence on the game. But, hey, what's a little bit of craziness between friends, I guess. Up to 42,553 damage. Still only 2 kills, but up to 6 citadels and 55 shell hits. Now, apparently I must have been listening to my Soviet bias playlist, because apparently Rasputin is now on. Okay. So, we got some work to do, but we're really out of targets to effectively engage, and I'm kind of out of position as well. Part of that was because the Julio did not want to go into combat directly with the Julio if I could avoid it, especially not broadside. That was a really bad positioning, and we got extremely lucky that his shells impacted short and behind. Took minimal damage during that engagement. But now we've got some other targets that are coming up. Okay, so Nagato is dead. So once again, things are starting to look pretty good. Feeling pretty confident. So I think here we can play just a little bit more risky. There's just enough ships in the middle here that I think we can really swing pushing the middle here. So let's go ahead and let's dive in there. And a normal pen for 1500 damage. You can see normal pens against battleships, really not bad if you can get them. If you can't, because they're angling like most battleships tend to do, this ship starts becoming less fun and more frustrating. Don't beach, don't beach. And Gneisenau is not really paying too much attention, because had he, it would have been the end of me. Pretty decent number of hits there. 2 normal pens and 4 over pens equals 3000 damage. Yep. Must be a wargaming product. Okay, so now he's bowing, and we're going to see the big damage drop off here. So we switch to HE. And of course, as soon as you switch to HE, he starts going broadside again. And this is one of the things that I found is quite an issue with this ship, is just the delay in reload. That was 3900 damage with HE, and started him on fire, which he repaired right away. So I had switched to AP there because, well... and as you can see, we're back to HE. So he's going to come back to bite me in the rear, because by the time he had cycled around, he had exposed enough of a side profile that we probably could have gotten away with AP. He's down to 1300 hit points. He's trying to get another, that he was trying to get that other salvo off, and at this point I'm sitting here thinking, oh, this is a sure kill. No, 413 damage because the module, one of the turrets ate the HE shells and prevented their penning hits. So we got 1 normal pen of HE for 400 damage. So we had finally switched back to AP here. We got Furutaka feeling pretty confident about this shot. And... Wah, 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 wah. That should have probably been a Citadel, but didn't aim high enough, and as a result, he was just out of range by moving a little bit, and then he went ahead and died. So we're going to dump a set of precautionary torpedoes there just in case the Liebrecht Moss decides that he's going to poke his head around the end of the island there. Probably not going to happen. Usually doesn't. Up to 54,285 damage. And, well, still only 2 kills. 100 shell hits. 1 fire. 6 citadels. Hi, this kind of damage on other, with other ships would definitely result in better damage numbers. Okay, so now we've got a broadside Arizona. Generally speaking, a pretty easy ship to deal with especially when you're not the focus. He's relatively broadside. We're going to slow down here. 4 normal pens, 2,300 damage with the HE. It's okay. Would like to see more. Would like to see fires. Just continuing to lay it out. Trying to do my best to pay attention here. We got 30 seconds until Hydro is up. Very disconcerting. I forgot to mention that this ship has Hydro. It does not have access to anything else other than Hydro, though. We got started on fire there by Liebrecht Moss, so we got to keep moving again. Gonna try and sneak some more salvos over. We've got another fire on the Arizona, but we got an island in the way. And at this point, I make a little bit of a mistake. Yep. And that's going to be the end of us. We ended up finishing here. We'll skip to the end. And we end up at the end battle screen with 70,000 damage, specifically 70,596 damage in those 2 fires, and ended up second on the team. We ended up losing. Not overall the best match in the world. Anyway, I hope this video has been helpful to you. I'm glad to be back. Anyway, I'm your Peacekeeper. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks for watching.